Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Frontline Fridays, where we dive into the hearts and minds of leaders who elevate retail and hospitality front lines to greatness. And we learn about what is their secret sauce. And today is a very important conversation, so I'm excited to have this. This show is brought to you by YOOBIC, the AI-powered mobile app that gives frontline teams the performance tools they need to communicate, learn, and work right in the palm of their hand. And I'm Ron Thurston, your guide on this journey and podcast host. I'm the author of the best-selling book, Retail Pride, and the co-founder of a company called Aussie, where our vision is to transform retail recruitment with groundbreaking tech for candidate digital profiles and flat rate pricing for retailers. Go to useaussie.com to learn more. And also go to youbic.com/Frontline Fridays or Frontline Fridays podcast to watch or listen to all previous episodes of this show. We've got a really nice homepage on the YOOBIC site now to learn more. So today we're going to dive into a topic that touches every corner of the retail industry, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion. Our rapidly evolving retail industry, these are not just buzzwords. They are essential frameworks that can dictate a company's success or sometimes failure. A recent McKinsey report highlighted that companies with diverse leadership are 33% more likely to outperform their peers on profitability. And while many retail organizations have committed to DEI as part of their customer strategy, just a few have succeeded in creating a fully inclusive work environment. So I'm thrilled to have Michelle Emery with us today, who will help unravel really what a lot of that means and its impact on all of our work. Michelle has been a transformational leader in the retail industry for over 25 years, driving business operations, profitability, and team development, always with a focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Her most recent role was as the vice president of DEI for Macy's. Michelle partnered with senior and C-suite leaders to embed DEI principles into business and talent practices. And she revitalized Macy's employee resource group, ERG chapters to create a culture of belonging where all employees and customers felt valued and empowered. In 2023, Macy's was awarded Best DEI Learning and Development Program by the Brandon Hall Group, which showcased Michelle's work on the DEI simulation training. And Michelle got her start studying consumer behavior and social wellness at the University of North Texas, and then went on to hone her skills with a master's in management from the University of Illinois. And she spent some time at the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising, where I went to school, so we are alumni peers. And she really spiced up her view on how fashion and business come together. Michelle also crafted her ongoing development as a DEI practitioner through certificates in diversity and inclusion from Cornell and a sociology of race and ethnicity, to name a few. So Michelle, I'm really happy that you're on the show today. I'm excited about this conversation.
Thank you, Ron. I am excited to be here. One of my favorite topics. Although I've worked in retail a long time, this certainly has been a great passion of mine, along with running the business.
Amazing. And you and I were introduced through a mutual friend named Michelle LaRusso. So I'm hoping that she's watching today or listening.
I hope so.
You and I met a couple months ago, and we had a call just to introduce ourselves to each other. And I'm like, I need to spend more time with this woman. I need to have this woman on this show. And so I'm really happy that you're here.
Thank you. Thank you. Excited for the conversation.
Great. So I'm going to set the stage a bit because the topics here are complex and serious, but at the same time, you said to me, this should also be fun, that we have to understand that while there are important conversations to have and maybe fear having them, which I think I was having a bit of afraid to ask the wrong questions. You said, don't let the fun seep out of this conversation. And I wrote a statement to myself that I heard you say, which was the foundation of this conversation is to understand how all of us play a role in providing equal opportunities to everyone, and to recognize that opportunities are not equal today. And I think when I say that those two sentences, it sets the stage of recognition of we have to understand and recognize that opportunities are not equal, and that we all play a role in changing that, or using our privilege. So we're gonna talk more about that. But I wanted to just start as a little bit maybe of an education of helping define diversity, equity, inclusion, how those three words work together, what they mean to you in your work.
Yeah, no, I love that we did have that conversation, and I know there was a bit of fear around, what to ask and to be respectful, and, which I love, as we all should be. But the fun comes into play when you're learning about people. That's really what this work is we all come from different backgrounds, different experiences, socioeconomic, identity. The list is vast. So it's really about learning about one another and how we continually respect one another. To do that, you have to know a little bit more about each other, about cultures, and what that means to people in terms of food, dance, music, etc. Those things can be fun. Now, while there's a serious element always, there are elements that we can also smile and laugh with one another. Because I think if we can get through that and break that barrier, we can do much more together with just a little spice and a little bit of fun. So I'll start with that. But diversity, equity, and inclusion is a key, essential, important part to organizations, and not just since 2020. Many organizations had DEI roles and departments before 2020 happened. We all know that 2020 changed our world. Everyone was impacted by the murder of George Floyd, and I think that everyone I have spoken to has definitely said that, whether they are a person of color or not. So I think that for us to continue to have this conversation, I applaud you in having this conversation, especially in the context of retail. One of my specialties and one of the things I loved to do most was to ensure that DEI filtered all the way through the organization. So it doesn't live at the central level, it lives all the way through the organization. And that is really important. If there's a takeaway, that is really important to understand, so that your strategies are not just for a specific group of employees, it is for everyone. Critical in retail to ensure our frontline colleagues, our frontline employees really do truly understand diversity, equity, and inclusion, and not just understand it, but live it and breathe it, because that is the contact to your customer. So if you don't get DEI perspectives, strategy, initiatives throughout the entire organization, and it lives in one portion, your strategy isn't successful. So again, I am an advocate to ensure that our frontline colleagues get this DEI strategy from every organization, especially those brick and mortar, stores, retailers. So for me, diversity is all about different backgrounds, different identities, cultures, perspectives, and that's what kind of we bring to a specific organization. Equity is about fairness and equal opportunities for everyone, regardless of any background or identities. And then when you talk about inclusion, that's really the practice of creating a sense of belonging and welcoming for everyone and respecting all individuals. So there's like three questions you ask yourself. Does my organization have DEI? So the questions I ask frequently are, do I see myself at the highest levels of leadership? Is the company working on eliminating barriers to access for me? And is my perspective valued? So if you can answer those three questions in your organization, then your organization is probably taking steps to focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, which really all play together for that ultimate outcome. And you and I have spoken about this, which is belonging. The D plus the E plus the I equals the B. All of DEI initiatives and strategies should ultimately land to all your employees feeling a stronger sense of belonging.
Beautiful. I want to touch on one thing you said when you said when we think about inclusion, the barriers to employee development and growth. And I'm recognizing, 2 weeks ago, we did this show from the offices at LinkedIn after spending a day with Sharika Hill was the guest, speaking about sometimes we don't refer to retail as a career because you may have not chosen this yet as your career. We think of this in terms of using the word advancement. And so when I hear you say understanding and recognizing the barriers to growth, how do we do that? We say, maybe I want to grow. I'm not sure this is my career. How do we say to ourselves, there are barriers for growth for maybe certain groups of people? How do you identify that?
I think twofold. So on the organization side is understanding that there is a barrier. And when they look at, again, D plus E plus I, look at the diversity at every single level. Do I truly have the diaspora of my customer? And then where do I have those gaps? And how do I ensure that I provide that equity for whatever group to continue their development to move throughout the organization? On the individual side, I say research retail. I know when I met my husband and I worked in retail, he was very perplexed on what I actually did because I was not a frontline colleague. I was in leadership, but he did not truly understand all of the things that I did in terms of leadership development. And, you know, it wasn't just helping customers, but it was understanding the merchandise needs of our customer and, you know, ensuring that I am also developing myself to move throughout the organization. He really truly didn't understand what the large, vast components of retail that make up retail. So I would say to individuals, research retail, research those opportunities, because you would not believe how many people just kind of fell into it, did it as a, you know, holiday job, and now 26 years later, look up, they're still there. You know, when I went to FITM, my major was merchandise marketing. So I loved the business aspect of it. You know, you and I spoke, we both wanted to be buyers and thought that was retail. That's a component of retail, but it's not everything. So I had to really look around and say, well, I'm really good at this. I really like this. How can I move forward? I couldn't move forward if there were barriers, right? That the equity piece to continue my development. So organizations have to truly understand what those barriers are and then create strategies so that people can move throughout your organization successfully.
And when you can share examples of growth, I think that helps paint the story of maybe how we've recognized that there were barriers, and now we've worked to eliminate them. And maybe here are some success stories that we could potentially share. But when we think about this work, because to your point, when you started, 2020 really launched deeper thought here and very important and necessary conversations. And here we are in 2024, and we hear a lot of how this has changed, and maybe this work has not become as important. So what prevents companies, brands, leaders, everyone from having these conversations, even without a huge strategy? I think what I love is that you and I could sit down and I could ask questions that I don't understand. And while I know that it's my own personal responsibility to educate myself, I also like to ask a lot of questions. That's why I love doing podcasts. But what prevents people from doing this work and having the hard conversation?
Yeah, so like I stated before, 2020 was definitely a catalyst for many organizations to begin DEI strategies and or departments, functions within their organization. I think that since then, there has definitely been some softening, I think, of, you know, overall DEI initiatives for various reasons. Let's just call it what it is. DEI is being attacked from every corner right now. And there are forces out there who do not believe in this work, which exacerbates people's reasons on why not to care about diversity, equity, inclusion within their own companies. I really kind of boil it down to three things. It's a lack of awareness, your unconscious bias, and fear. So in lack of awareness, people just do not fully understand the impact on other people. and they're not aware of their own biases on any other marginalized group. Unconscious bias is the second one, and that really, prevents people from moving forward quickly, because you have to acknowledge, understand it, and then work on it to get through that. So people come in with their preconceived notions and stereotypes about different groups, and that influences their behaviors with their peers, their leaders, and it also, influences their decision-making in the organization. And then fear. This is the big one. This one is tougher to move through because, biases you can start to formalize. Maybe I had a preconceived notion about a group. Fear is much different, and it lies a little bit deeper in all of us. And that fear is the fear of the change and what is unknown. Fear of, what am I going to lose? What could I possibly lose if my organization continues to focus on DEI? Is it my work relationships, or is it truly job security? So those things really do hold people back. I think that organizations have to consider all three of those when they are developing their approach to DEI.
Yeah. And we could go so deep on all just those three alone. I mean, honestly, and
yeah,
so many thoughts. But if we go back to when we think about, as you had mentioned, supporting and encouraging the front line, this begins in the hiring process. And so it actually starts before the hiring process. Where are jobs posted? Is there equal opportunity for candidates based on where that job is posted? Because you then have to recognize things like maybe there isn't technology available to do that. Maybe I actually don't have Wi-Fi at home. Maybe there are things that prevent me from applying for this work. And so there are obstacles before the job even starts. And so how do brands think about incorporating DEI into the hiring process today from your experience?
Yeah, I think the first thing I would say is understand who your customer is and understand where you might have gaps of representation throughout your organization. So, gathering that data and ensuring that you gain insights from that, I think are very important to start with. From there, it's important to, if we take it from the top, look at your job descriptions. And does it really make sense to everyone? Is there inclusive language or exclusive language within those job descriptions when you are posting? And all of the requirements that's listed, going through this process myself, there are so many requirements. And then at the end, it says, we encourage you to apply, even if you do not fit all these requirements. And in my head, I'm like, then why add them? I'm not sure. Why add them? So how do we make the job descriptions under these requirements much more inclusive to everyone? You're setting the stage for that sense of belonging, I have to say, right there. If there's a list that I only maybe fill half, maybe I do get chosen for the role, but I already feel like I can't do these other 10 things. So brands are setting the stage for that sense of belonging at the very beginning, and that starts with that job posting. So again, very important to understand. I think the next thing brands can do is when you're going through the interview process, who am I interviewing with? Who do I see? Do I see a representation of your customer, or do I see a representation of corporate America? So it's important to have a diverse interview panel and insert that into your hiring process so that it is folks who you will be interacting with on a day-to-day and folks who are also within that organization. But again, is it representative of your customer base? So not necessarily US demographics, because every company does not service every single customer, and we know that. So but is it representative of who you serve? And will I see that as you're going through that interview process? I think the last piece is truly providing education and training to hiring managers. So we spoke earlier about unconscious bias and that we all have them. It influences how we interact with people. It influences our decision making. This is a big piece of decision making, is who's going to join the organization. So if our hiring managers aren't educated on unconscious bias, then we're going to be starting from behind the start line all the time. If they're going to hire the same type of person, you will end up with a very homogenous organization.
Right. And I would add, when you say representative of your customer, it's also representative of your customer in that location that you're hiring. So a brand like Macy's, where you're from, that has hundreds of stores, or brands that I've led, the profile, one job description does not fit all. You told me a story when you were a general manager, store director, of joining a location, leading a location that was primarily Spanish speaking.
Yes.
And that, I mean, I'll let you tell the story, but they kind of came to you and said, you don't look like us.
Yes, no,
and
it was.
You don't speak like us. And so that's, it's another layer in hiring the representing of your customer, but it's so thoughtful. And I do think we can't just homogenize one job description fits a sales associate in this brand. So I'll let you expand on that.
It is so much deeper, like you said. And when I say across every level of the organization, truly look at that. Again, your customer base should match your colleague base, and that colleague base and employee base should match what it looks like at senior leadership levels. So it's got to be all the way through. When we're talking about stores, I've worked in, oh my gosh, 5, 6 stores within my former employer, and they were all fantastic experiences. My favorite was the one where I worked in a store that hardly anyone looked like me. And the leadership were, Latino and Hispanic individuals. And so was the customer base. So walking in, usually being a Black woman, I'm the only one with white colleagues around me. This was very different. I was walking in as a person of color into another group of color. It was the most invigorating and fun, challenging experience because they accepted me. They were absolutely amazing. However, they said, for you to really immerse yourself in what we do, we would like for you to try to speak to us in our language, try to engage us in a different way. And we had so much fun with my very poor Spanglish. I will say that up front. I do not speak Spanish. However, I am from Southern California, so Spanglish is kind of my second language. And they opened their arms to me. They would kind of stand there and say, well, what did you want me to do? If I said it in English, and I would have to get it out in Spanish the best way I could, and they would laugh and go off and do their task. But that's the fun I'm talking about, Ron. That's the fun that can be infused in this work every single day. And, I was always respectful of their culture. They were always respectful of mine. And we learned about each other in such a fun and respectful way. It will remain my most favorite store experience just based on that. So diversity, equity, and inclusion has been a part of my journey from the very beginning, truly.
Yeah, I can feel that. It's beautiful. We're definitely going to run out of time today, but I want to spend a couple of moments on, we talk about mentorship, which we spent a lot of really incredible conversations about mentorship, sponsorship, which is different, and allyship, because for myself, sometimes I'm invited into spaces where I consider myself an ally, but I'm maybe sometimes uncomfortable using that title of, well, why are you here? There's a women in retail technology invited me to be part of their organization. I'm in technology in my own way, but identifying as male, I'm like, but why am I here? What do you need from me? And so I also think, like, am I an ally? Am I a sponsor? So if you can unravel that a little bit, because I struggle with this.
Sure. In the context of a company is kind of how I will put it. So mentorship is someone at a leadership level who you might identify with culturally. I truly believe that people need that in large organizations, especially because they will have similar experiences to you. So they can help guide and navigate your overall career and give you a little bit more personal, right, attention versus professional. It is a little bit of both, but it can be very personal when someone has had those same experiences as you have had. A sponsor is definitely that professional partnership. So it is someone who understands what you do, understands your work, gets to know you as a person, but they will speak your name in a room full of opportunities. And those opportunities aren't necessarily always a promotion. It could be a leader of a task force, working on a specific project. So it's not necessarily all about promotion, so to speak. So sponsors really help you with that professional development. And then allyship is something a little bit different. So when I think of an ally, it means you stand by me. You support the causes, you support my common goals. You work to, help eliminate any systemic barriers, but you stand by me in whatever means most to me, no matter my identity, your identity. So yes, Ron, you can be an ally for women at work. Absolutely. It's important that we have allies for many underrepresented groups, because you have to figure outside of those four walls, there might not be allies in their communities, right? We all have very different experiences. So having an ally specifically at work who they are there for you, have your back, so to speak, can be very, very important as you move throughout the organization and grow your development and your overall career.
Thank you for saying that. And I also think identifying the definition of the word, then I'll maybe digs deeper. And I think that was the next conversation here around understanding your privilege. How can my privilege provide allyship to others? And the word privilege, and I mentioned to you when we last spoke, there's a woman named Amber Cabral who I met in 2020 because she was supporting the work. She was hired by Gap Inc. to support conversations around George Floyd's murder and the high store count we had, all of it. And so Amber has a podcast called Guilty Privilege. And I've posted about this. She and I are friends, and her episodes are always so insightful and thoughtful about what privilege do you refuse to feel guilty about, and what privileges do you recognize the privileges around you. And so some of that is related to race, to gender, to how you identify, but there are also privileges like I have hot and cold running water. That's a privilege. I speak the language, the most common language in this country. That's a privilege. And so you also unravel this word in so many different ways. So I wanted to let you expand on that and think about, I guess, allyship, mentorship, sponsorship, and privilege, and how we can think about how we use our power.
Yeah. And you just said it truly. They all kind of really do work together, but it is using your power. I think the first step is recognizing that you have a privilege. It's not a bad thing. It is nothing to feel guilty about. It is, this work can be so emotional. And I get that it evokes guilt in people. However, that's not why this work is created. This work was created to ensure that we all have the same advantages, all. So I understand that sense of guilt, but you have to first recognize that I have a privilege, whatever that may be, and you listed several of them. So once you do that, then it's how can I actively use my privilege to support others? It looks different in many different ways. If you have something others do not, how are you providing equity for someone else? Whether that's groups of people, whether that's within your community or within your overall organization. But that the guilt piece should be the jumping off point for you to take action. So try not to internalize that, because again, that's not why this work is done. So try not to internalize that guilt, so to speak, but how do you use that as a catalyst to use your privilege to help support others? And again, there are so many ways. I know we don't have a whole lot of time, but there's so many ways for you to do that. But the most important thing is to recognize that you have them and recognize what they are, and then how you can use them to help support others.
Yeah, and take the yeah, the kind of guilt out of it. And so I'll use myself. If Women in Retail Technology says, Ron, we'd love for you to be part of that, I'm not guilty that I'm a man supporting a female-led organization.
Right.
I have influence, and I have the ability to make introductions and to celebrate your work and create business opportunities. I myself have that privilege.
Right.
And so if me being an ally, recognizing that privilege provides opportunities for you, then let me do that. And I think it's just using the word, say, yes, I do have privileges. What are they, and how can they be used to create equity? So thank you for that. It feels almost empowering in some ways to be able to say it.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah, thank you. I want to maybe run just a couple minutes over because I want to think about the future, and kind of how do we envision the future of this work, and what can all of us do that are listening to be part of the work and create change. And kind of where I started, recognize that opportunities are not equal, and how can we help support that and help change. I shouldn't say support. How can we change that?
Yeah, I think the first thing I will say is, how do DEI practitioners and people within organizations lead with empathy? That's truly, we have to have that for one another before we can enact change in any situation, but specifically within the diversity, equity, and inclusion work. So lead with empathy. It's okay to ask questions if you don't know, but if you lead with empathy, the other person will absolutely understand. We all make mistakes. No one is perfect. There are many different instances where people may say something, but the idea is to take ownership and say, I'm sorry, I didn't know, and I will do better moving forward. So I just kind of want to get that out there. This work is ever evolving. There is no end. It is ever evolving as we want to create that equity for many different groups of people. I, envision a future where it's not the buzzword, as you stated at the top of the program, and that it becomes kind of fundamental aspect in our lives, not just, at work, but also, within our social interactions outside of work. So while there's a lot of work to do, I think we can all definitely do that by taking a look at are you a mentor to underrepresented groups? And how can you support someone's career? Can you be a sponsor? Can you take the time to speak someone else's name? Can you take the time to help elevate, their development within the organization? I think advocacy and allyship are very important, whether that's inside the four walls or outside of the four walls. So standing by them, and advocacy is using your voice to support them. So when I think about the civil rights movement, I think about, absolutely about all of, my 4 Black African-American brothers and sisters who were out there on the front lines and doing the work. But I also think about those others who helped support, those others who were out marching, the others who helped with the policy changes. So we had to have allies and advocates for social justice then, as we do now. I think the voices have been dimmed for allies and advocates, but we definitely need those in this work every single day. So there's not a future without allies. There's not a future of DEI without allies and advocacy.
Yeah, and to not be afraid to do or say the wrong thing in it. Like you said, ask questions, do your own homework, and your own research, your own reading. You're listening to podcasts like this and Amber Cabral's, and there are others. Educate yourself and then ask other questions. How can I be helpful? How can I use my privilege in ways that support equity? How can I recognize that people around me may be walking in the world in an uncomfortable way, and you don't even see it? Like all of this is well beyond work. I know we talk about frontline work and so business savvy, but this is life. This is also just life.
It is life, and fear is part of life, but you can eliminate that fear through education, getting to know people, There are podcasts, books, articles, great webcasts such as this one. There are many things that people can do to educate themselves that will help eliminate some of that fear. And then the other piece, like I said prior, is the empathy part. Understand that your experience isn't the only experience. It isn't. So understanding all the vast diaspora of experience in the United States, I think will help stem that fear and just promote inclusion just because you know. So again, I think knowledge, education is very important. And I think that empathy piece is absolutely imperative.
Well, this is a joy, and we could spend another hour easily.
I know.
Where can
Easily.
people find you, Michelle? Like, how can people get in touch with you?
I am on LinkedIn, so Michelle Emery.
Great. Amazing. Thank you for doing this, and thank you for
Absolutely.
your work and the future work that you're going to do and the influence that you have. It's a pleasure knowing you.
Thank you. You as well, Ron.
Thank you. Thanks very much. And thanks everyone for staying a little bit longer. If you were able to hold on an extra 5 minutes today, I can't get enough of this. So thank you again to our listeners, and to keep your retail pride strong. I will be back on May 10th with another incredible guest, Yolanda Vega, who's the director of stores for Zadig and Voltaire. Be sure to follow YOOBIC on LinkedIn for show details, and to watch or listen to all prior episodes of the show. And that said, if you are on the hunt for a next generation communication, micro-learning, and task management mobile platform to guide your frontline teams into the future, check out what YOOBIC can do. Just click on the link of the comments here or at yoobic.com. And with that, have a great weekend, everyone, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks, Michelle.